No, no buzz. The Just Bees Book Club. I finally, after way too many years, read Brazil-maru by Karen Yamashita. Um, Karen, of course, the best teacher I ever had. Opened so many doors to me. And I have somehow read embarrassing little of her novels. So I saw a copy of Brazil-maru come in, and I was like, I've read through the Arc of the Rainforest, but it's been a million years. I've circled K cycles of time. I still haven't got around to iHotel, but Brazil-maru seems like a much more like it's her second novel, and I just wanted to read it. That was actually the entirety of my thought process. It's her second novel, and I wanted to read it, and I did. And in many ways, I'm bummed to have put it off for so long, and in other ways, I'm not, because of one specific author that I'll talk about in a second, who I think shares some of the concerns in this book in a really interesting way that I'll maybe articulate or maybe I won't. This is a this is a Just Bees book club. It's one take, and you're only here if you're a bee, so you better be a bee if you're here. Um, the broad outline of Brazil-maru is that it is a novel of some Japanese Christians who, in sort of the wake of the Chinese Exclusion Act in the U.S., start moving to, or broader socially, a lot of Japanese migrant laborers start moving to Brazil rather than the U.S. At a certain point because of a number of factors, openness to the land, certain constituencies, things like that. Um, and this is the story specifically of a couple of families who are specifically Christian missionaries to Brazil, who, very broadly speaking, establish a Christian commune in a forest in Brazil that is like not super far away from Sao Paulo, but like not close either. It is sort of um, headlined or underlined by an individual named Cantaro, who sort of brings the community together under his own ideals, and it's narrated with or it's told in 5 parts. Is that right? Is 5 parts right? Part one, part two, part three, part four, and an epilogue. Yeah, it's told in 5 parts and 4 parts plus an epilogue. Each part by a different character, sort of situated in different parts of the commune over time. Um, the Christian commune over time. Um, Many of which are focalized around Kantaro, who gets the point of view in the third chapter, which I thought was, or the third part, which I thought was a really smart structural choice, um, given who he is and what's going on throughout the thing. It's lovely. The first like 120 pages, I was just like, there's like nothing happening, and I'm really enjoying it. And of course, there was so much happening. But like, it's not a plot driven thing. It is a lot of it is just sort of scenes and moments. Each section is, I believe, all 4 of them, if not all 5, has it's a Thoreau quote or an Emerson quote. It's Rousseau for part one. It's probably actually Rousseau for all of them. You can see how much of the transcendentalists I have internalized across my lifetime. Let's see. I believe it is just Rousseau straight through. Yeah, it's Rousseau. So it is very clearly doing a sort of intertextual engagement with Rousseau, and the broader transcendentalists, I guess. Probably, who would know? Who could tell? Who could tell? It was originally published in 1990, and just it's great. I really love this book, and I'm gonna send Karen an email and just be like, hey, thanks. I haven't talked to you in 3 years or whatever, but thanks for writing this book. 34 years ago or whatever. Um, yeah, so it's engaged with the literature of, you know um, back to nature, with the questions of the natural world very explicitly, with the Rousseau quotes at the beginning. They're about teaching and utopianism, and it sort of begins with the story of the oldest son of one of the original families that move on a ship called the Brazil-maru to Brazil. Um, and then yeah, throughout generations, it really engages with how that community builds itself up, how it strengthens itself. There's a really, really fantastic sequence where this new dude who's like a Japanese pistolero shows up kind of out of nowhere and is made to like surrender a bunch of his arms, even though because he's been a bandit for a long time. He sort of like can't really integrate with the community, but like Kentaro has gotten the baseball bug and is like obsessed with baseball, and this dude is also very good at baseball, and so the community is like doesn't bring itself together through ideals in this particular moment, and it's like its establishment. It brings itself together through the activity and spectacle and training regimen of baseball, and this is all paralleled with the rise of Japanese imperialist fascism. This is in like the 30s, I want to say, and there's like some amount of communication back home. It's what I'm saying is the way that Karen writes a story about just like a small community that kind of like is just kind of trying to knit itself together over and over in different ways as it grows, as it shrinks, as it encounters different problems, is so well done that it feels like nothing's happening until things until you sit back and think, or until you get farther in and there are some revelations that are made, and it's like, oh shit, yeah, of course, all of that. And it's not because she doesn't make explicit that some of these things are happening, right? It's not that like the way that organized sports can tend towards a um, a militaristic regimentation of the body aren't really explicitly that point isn't not explicitly made in those moments, but it feels like another sort of like passing thought if you're just reading it as like, wow, these people came into this place, and that's like a kind of complicated kind of complicated relationship to the land and etc. But uh, it's also just like things these people are thinking about because they're trying a utopian experiment, right? They're trying to live according to their principles and ideals, and they are doing it in such a way that they are supported by their spiritual leader, Momose Sensei. There is like all these, and of course, the basis of all of this is these people feel like characters. They feel like people who kind of like move together, and some of them are more well sort of like drafted than others because of how the point of view lands on them, but none of them feel like they are just there to advance the story because the story feels secondary next to what these individuals are doing at any given moment in time, and how that's reflecting history, and how that's reflecting um, other characters' wants, needs, desires, demands, preferences, all these things, right? And by reflecting, I also can mean not reflecting, of course, because that's tension, that's movement. Um, all to say, I I think this is like a really special book, and like I said, there's like part of me that wishes I had read this 20 years ago or whenever, before I would have been. I mean, I first encountered Karen in 2007, probably, so just shy of 20 years ago, like 15 years ago. I wish I'd read it in closer to then than now in many ways. But the thing that made me especially excited about it in a strange way is in the Kentaro section, there is this incredible depiction of the man who basically kept this community together. And I want to say it's like the very first line in that section. Let's see. Part 3, Kantaro. Just gonna read the I'm gonna read this paragraph, right? So this is part three of what was it? Brazil-maru, 117 in this edition, um, which is like kind of a weird size, but that's fine. Shout outs to Coffee House. Um, Chapter 11, Natsuko. By the end of the war, I was the leader of a large commune of 300 people farming on a ranch of 420 acres and at least another 1,000 in outlying areas. At this time, we had a group of 10 poultry barns and 5,000 laying hens. Seijiro Befu had his trap nests filled with breeding hens stacked 3 and 4 shelves high. Befu and I walked through the barns, inspecting our work. The layers all clucking in contentment, nesting in the sweet-smelling rice and sugar cane chaff. Smooth, white, perfect eggs peering from beneath the feathers. We were selling eggs in the immediate vicinity, but if Befu continued to breed with such success, we would need to find markets further away. Befu could easily see our operation doubling in the next few years. Now that money had again begun to flow, it was time to venture out to make deals, to expound on new ideas, to get financing for new projects. 300 hard-working, dedicated people were an immense fortune and productive wealth. It could not be overlooked. Befu and and others had spoken about so many possibilities, so many grand projections. Now, with proper financing and a network of cooperative support, a great dream could be realized. I, Kantaro Uno, would turn Esperanza into a great civilization. Um, and then there's 3 asterisks, and then there's been much conjecture over the years about my life in the city. Everyone has a story and a particular perception to tell about this period, but I will set the record straight. Of these things I will be honest. There is nothing to hide. My life is an open book. And Kantaro Uno goes on to basically describe himself as somebody who knows himself to be a sinner, but could never repent because he lived life by his own principles on his own terms at every moment, and he doesn't understand how there could be a different way to live life that wasn't a full life. And in reading that, I was like, first of all, this is this is a great description. How do I say? This is a great description of an idealist who you could also read as a cult leader, who you could also read as a genuinely dedicated individual who fucked up, right? Like, the man is never reduced in the rhetoric or in his actions or in the sort of community view to anything but like a complicated character who definitely fucks up, definitely is egotistical as shit, like has huge problems that cause huge problems for other people, and he's in a position that make that structurally fucked up, which is a great character. And I think Yasha like handles that so well throughout throughout the novel. But the thing that it made me think of that I wouldn't have thought of if I had read it long ago, as I kind of continually wished I had, is how much it actually reminds me of Rivers Solomon's books. And I think I've talked about this on something at this point, one of these videos. Probably on Sorrowland when I read that. But one of the sort of central themes, and I maybe talked about it on Model Home recently, but one of the central themes that I perceive in River Solomon's work is the way that they tend to find, they tend to start from utopia and find, this is like a Omelis thing or whatever, right? But like they find the ways in which the breakdown occurs, and they find the character for whom which the utopia doesn't work, and not in a like selfish way, right? In a like, who is the pain, who is the trauma being dumped upon, where are the structural flaws in this in this no place that is supposed to be perfect, right? You think of the deep You think of the narrator, like the mermaid, on whom like the entire weight of the cultural history is dumped, and the fact that that cultural history is, being uh, the waterborn, like literally born in the water descendants of slaves who were tossed overboard during the Middle Passage. Probably the most extremely clear version of that these mermaids build themselves a bit of a utopia, but it's all based on one of them having to remember the truth and then having to speak to the truth to everyone to have it cleared, and that's the person we sort of engage with, or whose perspective we see the whole thing through with. In Sorrowland, of course, it is again our protagonist. I don't remember her name off the top of my head, um, their name off the top of my head, but the person who, at the beginning of the book, is running through the woods, being chased away from the utopian home. That's the only place they've ever known, until they have to stop in the middle of being chased to give birth to twins, and then keep running from the place again that like was set up as a refuge for Black Americans within the United States. That is literally a utopian commune, right? Model Home, of course, begins with our narrator in England, in the most dilapidated house that they could possibly find, because they want the opposite of what their parents gave them when they were young, which was a spacious home in a gated community in, I believe, Dallas, because they were Black revolutionaries and they were like, and academics, and they were like, well, I at least want to live near where my family are, and to show people that Black people can live in the world, and then that of course leads to the haunted house story of Model Home. One of the things that, and I could be wrong here, because I do remember there being a sort of speech by the head of the commune in Sorrowland, or the Inherited One. But one of the things I don't think Solomon engages with, and I have not read Unkindness of Ghosts, and I'm very curious about it, and I really want to, and I will, but I can't speak to that one at all. But one of the things I think Solomon doesn't do that this book does extremely well is engage with the head of that commune on the like very personal level that we get in that section on Cantado Uno, and his open book of a life, as I read earlier, right? And the fact that he is the one who's saying it. And I don't think that's a thing that Solomon has to do. Solomon is, of course, working in the genre space in many ways, which has different demands and expectations. So I'm not trying to compare them in the sense of like who did it better, who wore it better. What I'm saying is that it was very interesting to me to read a book by Karen Yamashita, written in 1990, that shared so many of these concerns with River Solomon, who, more recent writer, I guess, been writing for the better part of a decade. I guess The Deep was 2019. Yeah. Unkindness is probably somewhere between 2016 and 2018. I don't remember exactly because I haven't read it, and I also am bad with dates. But I guess what I'm saying is that there's a productive dialogue happening between this book and some of the deeper premises of Solomon's work that like set my brain a little bit abuzz. In a way that made me especially happy, on top of just like getting to read this really gorgeous, very internally complex novel about Japanese migration to Brazil in the early 20th century, that is also just like a joyous exploration of baseball and questions of, how the commune gets run. Haru is part two. Haru is Kantaro's wife, and like the amount of like time spent with her and her ability to just simply run shit from basically behind the scenes also like highlights Cantaro's uh, decisions in such a different light. Like the structure of this book is so good. The questions of invisibilized labor that happens across gendered lines extremely frequently, structurally, one might say, is so good. Like I can't, I, yeah, I can't believe it took me so long to read this book. Brazil-maru is so good. Karen is the best. Thanks for not watching.